Well, good morning, friends. Mark Holmes here with my buddy Cowboy Joe Boo, as well as Joe Bear in the house. And as always, I want to say thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, as well as you ladies, you know that this literally does not work. So let's get open for business here and let's wake up those football gods. Hope everybody's doing good on this Memorial Day, and remember what this holiday is really about. This is about the ones that are no longer here with us, the ones that have made the ultimate sacrifice. And remember those who are not here. We here are excited about the Dallas Cowboys. And I realize that it's easy to get caught up in the idea of bringing in more and more players. You know, we always see the Philadelphia Eagles constantly out there courting and bringing in more players and stuff and having success, be it they were just short by one game of winning the Super Bowl last year, that we want those shiny new pieces as well, that we look and we get caught up and say, man, if we get this guy, oh, we're going to do so good and things. And that's the reality is with DeAndre Hopkins, we need to just kind of let that thing go. The reality is the Cowboys have already invested so much money in that position. You know, we're about to redo CeeDee Lamb's contract. You know, we'd spent all the money with Amari Cooper. You redid Michael Gallup's. You got, Brandon Cooks there. To put that much more money, we know that Hopkins is probably looking for at least an Odell Beckham Jr. $15 million a year deal. And I'm not sure, this is the thing, I'm not sure with the way the market has been this year that he gets that number. We think about this season is the polar opposite of last year's. Last year, the money was flowing, the deals were being made. You just saw big name after big name just moving all over the place, from like Russell Wilson, of course, signing a big contract to go to Denver, and Randy Gregory. I believe Hargrave is probably the biggest deal that we saw this offseason. And when you started seeing Jalen Ramsey traded for just a third-round pick, you kind of wondered if the NFL was having collusions. Now, also with Hopkins now, this is where it's a double-edged sword. The Cardinals are saying that, they got rid of Hopkins. It's like they're looking for a reason why they got rid of Hopkins, because he didn't play in the final two games when he could have. Well, here's the problem. You guys had him on the injury report as being injured. So which was it? Was it you were lying on the injury report, which could actually be a problem because, honestly, you have to have what's going on for Vegas and the gambling sites. So you're falsifying injury reports, or you're doing typically what happens with most veteran players when the season is pretty much over, that you don't play them to risk them for injury. Are you just trying to save face because you ended up having to cut him and you didn't want to admit that we made a mistake? I think that's more of the case. But be that as it may, we always want what we don't have. We're like that spoiled kid that, has got everything, but they still want more. Well, I think that the Cowboys, which have $10.5 million and have another 10.9 coming come Wednesday, as we sit 101 days and 10 hours away from kickoff of the season. I think the Cowboys are looking at this differently, and this is only speculation. I have no clue what they're thinking. Of course, they're going to go ahead and get Diggs taken care of. Of course, they're going to go ahead and get CeeDee Lamb taken care of, and that's not going to eat up that whole $21 million. I think they're looking at this from a different standpoint of, let's wait and see what else is out there. The Cowboys can still get more money, and probably come training camp we'll get Dak Prescott's deal extension done where they'll save even more money. But I think they're going to look around and see possibly doing something like the Eagles have done, where they kept bringing in players during the season as people were injured to help have an impact. Quite frankly, if we are to believe that the Cowboys are not scrapping the whole offense, that they're going to use things that worked well for them, one of the things that they'll use a lot of will be 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. Because with 12 personnel, your tight ends could be blockers or receivers. You basically put the defense between a rock and a hard place with 12 personnel. Do you go with a heavy package, in which case they've got 7 guys to block? And if you do, with a Tony Pollard as a running back and a Deuce Vaughn, who are pass catchers, you can do things like shift, spread one of your tight ends out wide, take and put Deuce Vaughn or Tony Pollard in motion, empty backfield. Now you've got 5 guys out there to catch the football versus a heavy run stop package. The advantage is to the offense, because you're not going to be able to cover all of those guys with run stoppers. If they don't shift into, heavy package, stay in nickel, then you run on them all day. So if you have that kind of a package where you're going to have CD and Brandon Cooks or CD and Michael Gallup, Hopkins would end up being a luxury that you would very rarely use. You'd basically be spending $15+ million a year for a guy that's only going to play X amount. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that he would not be a benefit to the team, but you have to look at how they're going to run the offense. And so you start looking and saying, is that $15 million a year best put into a guy who's only going to get so much play? It's kind of like with Zeke Elliott. Was keeping $16 million a year for Zeke Elliott, who's only carrying the ball about 15 to 20 times a game at 3.8 yards a carry, worth that? No, we're better off spending those resources elsewhere. And that may be the main reason that you see the Cowboys not stepping up to the plate. Now, what you may find out, now this is where it could change. Where it could change is something that Philly 500 actually brought up and made a great point about. Buffalo and Kansas City both were having conversations with the Cardinals before his release. They're probably offering, 6th or 7th round draft pick, and they're like, screw y'all, and wanting them to eat some of the contract. Both of those teams have no money left over. They'd have to release other players or restructure contracts to get them underneath. What you may see is the Odell Beckham Jr. scenario, where he kept going around and going around and going around, and people weren't willing to come up with that money until finally Baltimore did, that the market may not be as big as Hopkins wants it to be for a guy who's going to be 31. So that's where all of a sudden maybe teams are kind of like, we're not spending $15 million. And then you're then looking at maybe a bargain rate. I don't think that's going to happen, because you look at the skills and a guy who does not drop anything, I still think he'll find a team. But we'll have to wait and see on it. An interesting thing, I'm sitting here going through and looking at Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, who, is considered, the 21st power-rated coach, who was completely dissed by the boys at Pro Football Focus. I was going back through his record, and what's interesting is looking at his record with the Green Bay Packers. It's actually pretty damn good. He was 8-8 his first season, 13-3 the second, did drop back to 6-10 that next year, but then 11-5, 10-6 with the Super Bowl, and then 15-1. What's typically happened with the Cowboys in the recent history of Jason Garrett and things, we either end up 8-8, 8-8, 8-8, or we go 14-2, and then 14-2. I'm sorry, 12-4, and then 4-12. Excuse me, 12-4, and then 4-12. We would always have this roller coaster record. But the thing with Mike McCarthy is he pretty much stays up. From 2009 and 2012, 11 wins, 10 wins, 15 wins, 11 wins. Then he had a bad year, 8-7-1. And then 12 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins. And his last couple of years in Green Bay, 7 wins and 4 wins. And, of course, that's after the team had gotten old and, gotten to the point where it's time to move on. You only have so many years as a coach to build your philosophy, get the players for your system before they start tuning out. And by 2017, 2018, the team had gotten old and had tuned out, and it was time for a change. You can look at Andy Reid, who was in Philadelphia, took them to a Super Bowl, and they did what the Eagles do. They lost it. Always was winning, and the Eagles said, meh, we don't need that guy. Change of scenery. He's back to being the best coach in history. Well, no, excuse me. It's Bill Belichick. But best offensive mind, maybe in NFL history. So that bodes well, in my mind, about Mike McCarthy. Let's see, as we get ready to get out of here, go up here and do some work in the workshop and run some errands with the wife on this Memorial Day, what they have to say about Mike McCarthy taking over the play calling.
I think just because the way we're practicing, they're able to do a little more. But, some guys are, like Tony's doing the walkthroughs and things like that. So, so you'll see them participate more. We're still in Dak's language. We're definitely built off of, if you just look at the history of our offense here, 2020 was really trying to really figure out who we wanted to be, if in that year with the pandemic and all the injuries and so forth. So, but I think the evolution of 21 and 22 is where the evolution from 21 to 22 is really the direction we want to continue to build off of. So, and if you look at the statistics of those 3 years of offense and in the areas of how we've the direction we're going, we'll continue on that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in order to continue in that direction, they're going to need to do so with McCarthy calling the plays for the first time in his tenure with the Cowboys. So do we see the Cowboys offense ascending in 2023, Peter?
That's the hope, right? Mm-hmm. You guys play in the NFL. Sorry you've covered it so long. OTAs, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, T-shirts, shorts. And yet, you are installing some of the new concepts, and you are starting to see it now. Mike McCarthy has coached offense for nearly 25 years in the NFL. He has a long history of it. It's more West Coast. It's a lot of stuff where we're talking about the blocking schemes may be a little different. But gosh, I thought Kellen Moore's offense was pretty darn good the last few years.
Talk about it.
I like Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator. I watched this Kellen Moore Cowboys offense. They put points on the board. They put up nearly 30 points on the board as an average.
Here we go.
While he was the OC. First when it comes to having those big 40-point games, total points. Now, you look at this and you're like, gosh, the Cowboys said, Kellen Moore, hit the road. He must be sitting on the side of the road wondering, gosh, where am I going to work next? Within seconds, the Chargers were like, what? Kellen Moore's available? And now Justin Herbert's getting to be in this Kellen Moore offense. And I think Justin Herbert in this Kellen Moore offense might look a little different than it was with Dak Prescott. I think this puts more of the onus on Dak. I am fascinated to look at the Kellen Moore's numbers versus Dak Prescott's numbers, and you're saying, well, that's not apples to apples. Well, one offensive coordinator was with Dak for the last 3 years. The other one is going to be with Kellen Moore. The other one is going to be with Justin Herbert for now, the next foreseeable future. End of the day, Dak Prescott led the league in interceptions last year. If you can get those down, you're going to help your team immensely. But I don't know if I point to Kellen Moore as the reason the Cowboys faltered. But I give Mike McCarthy credit. He's like, if I'm going down,
I'm going down my way.
It's my offense. And when I say going down, I mean, like, if this thing doesn't go the way it goes, we understand that Jerry Jones might want to look another direction. And on the other end of it, if it goes up, well, I don't want everyone saying Kellen Moore was the reason why. I was the one who put this in. Remember, a lot of the same concepts, what he said, but West Coast, which is what they didn't run under Kellen Moore, which is a lot of that go deep, Dak, and do your thing.
You're absolutely right when you talked about OTAs starting to install. The one thing we used to always say, a lot of the coaches I've had, you get to OTAs and you install the entire offense or defense all throughout the 10 OTAs, and then you get to training camp and you do it all over again to make sure by then everybody has mastered whatever you're going to do. So this time between Dak and Mike McCarthy is huge. But when you ask the question, are the Cowboys offense going to ascend, please put those numbers back up that Schrags just talked about. When you want to see an offense ascend and see where they're going to go, for the Dallas Cowboys, where are you going to go in an offense where you're saying you're going to ascend? When you look at the numbers on the right there for Kellen Moore, points per game, they're going to go from second to first. I guess that's a great jump. Is it, though? 40-plus point games, they're first. Total yards per game. So all of these numbers in the top 5 for this Cowboys offense, I don't think it's about ascension for them and for Mike McCarthy. You just said he's going to go down swinging with himself calling the plays. I think for him, this is more about him being the voice of the offense, them taking on his mentality and his thought process of how you go out there and win football games, starting with, obviously, the turnovers. But I think beyond that, Dak Prescott has talked about it throughout these OTAs as they're starting. He's getting used to just hearing Mike McCarthy's voice in his ear. He said he didn't even realize how much of an accent that Mike McCarthy had until he started calling the plays in his ears. And it sounds like it was kind of a joke, but now you see the nuances and the difference. On a play-to-play standpoint, it will be Mike McCarthy calling the plays. And it's not just you get in there and you say the play, overwrite, blah, blah, blah. It's the few tidbits that you're saying before and after you call the play. Hey, get guys in the huddle. We're going to be looking to go fast. Or whatever the case may be. Hey, slow it down. Ease everybody's tension. That voice, the sensei or whatever, the voice that's going to be up in the sky is going to be Mike McCarthy this year. And that's where he's looking to make the biggest difference.
And it's not about can this Cowboys offense get better? It's can they win football games?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the pressure that they are feeling is pretty real. And it's either going to make diamonds or it's going to burst pipes. And when I just look at this front office, I give this front office an A+ when it comes to putting together the right pieces around Dak Prescott, getting the right free agents, the right trades. If you can't pull up the depth chart, look what they had to do. They let Ezekiel Elliott go. It was a hard decision, but it was the right decision. Tony Pollard needs at least 20+ touches per game. He's the one that can get you the ball on the perimeter, out of the backfield. Get Tony Pollard the ball, something good will happen. They bring in Brandon Cooks. This is a guy, Mr. 1000. He's going to be consistent. Get them the ball down the football field. You know what's going to come when you have Brandon Cooks on your offense. And for Michael Gallup, he has a full offseason to just prepare, he doesn't have to rehab. Coming off that ACL injury last year, he's a guy that I really expect. When there's those 50-50 balls, Michael Gallup should come down with him. And for
hope he does.
Tight end,
Ferguson, who I don't know much about. He had a good year last year, but
it should be a breakout year for Ferguson, replacing Dalton Schultz. This guy's going to be fun to watch. And so it's on Dak Prescott and it's on McCarthy. NFC Championship or bust. That is what expected from this football team. If you cannot get it done, unfortunately, they may be looking for new jobs next year.
And I ask you, and I think those are real stakes. And Seahawks and Packers had so.
There you go. And I agree with that 100%. And I think that's the reason why you won't see DeAndre Hopkins with the Cowboys. They're going to be relying on these new weapons that they have. We've got a multitude of speedy weapons and things. Hopkins couldn't hurt the team, but you're going to look and say, is this the best use of putting all of our resources in? And I think that's not going to be the case. All right, good people, have a happy Memorial Day, and I'll see you guys soon.